There are many things that go into Suguru Geto turning out the way he did and the way we see him in Volume 0. We see that he is sort of like this big antagonist. He seems like he has this outward hate for the world, and that the only way that he can solve this hate is by creating a new nation of Jujutsu sorcerers. But Ghetto wasn't always this way. We see back in Hidden Inventory that Ghetto used to be a kind-hearted guy who actually had more respect for people than Satoru Gojo did. But somewhere along the line, something went wrong. Ghetto became the person who we knew in Volume 0. Something made Ghetto snap. Something made him go from kind-hearted and loving and wanting to protect humans to just ending up killing and using them for his own gain. And even if you agree or disagree with Suguru Geto's actions, he undoubtedly had the worst downfall in Jujutsu Kaisen. He went from being a person that we once all knew and loved to somebody who isn't even recognizable by the time we see him in Volume 0. His ideals and the way he treats people have completely flipped. So with that being said, let's get into the tragic downfall of Suguru Geto. First, we have to talk about the things that make Ghetto what he was back when he was just a teenager in the Jujutsu high school. We see that Ghetto is a respectful student. He holds respect for his superiors, and he even tells Gojo to have more respect for his superiors, and that people like him and Gojo exist to protect humans, because these humans are too weak to protect themselves. At this point in time, Ghetto is one of the most selfless people there are. You could even say that he is something like a saint. It seems like he is sort of like a pseudo Superman. Because Ghetto doesn't just hold these ideals about the world. He doesn't just say these kind things, he has the strength to back it up. At this point in time, he and Gojo are the two strongest Jujutsu sorcerers. Anytime that anything needs saving, they are there to save the person or the situation. And this is a huge burden for just two high schoolers to take on by themselves, which is why you could say this might be the reason Gojo always seemed to overly relaxed during Hidden Inventory, and it even seemed like he didn't care about things at times. Because, well, if you focus too hard on something, it could really take a toll on your mind, especially if the thing you are focusing on is saving human lives. And it just turns out that Ghetto focused on this more than anyone else. But even with all of this in mind, for the time being, it didn't seem like it was unbearable for Ghetto to deal with this, because he always had Gojo. Gojo was somebody who was as strong as he was and who understood and withstood the same burdens that Ghetto was facing himself. But this reliance on each other becomes very apparent because of one incident. And this incident that I am talking about is the Toji incident. A sorcerer killer named Toji Zenin is set on a mission to assassinate a star plasma vessel. And who else does the Jujutsu Society choose to protect this vessel other than Gojo and Ghetto? So, this random guy who we are meeting for the first time named Toji Zenin has to kill a person that is being protected by Gojo and Ghetto, the two strongest Jujutsu sorcerers. And of course, the way the story goes is Toji basically beats Gojo up very badly, and Gojo is just laying seemingly lifeless on the ground. And you see, Ghetto left with the star plasma vessel because he expected Gojo to be able to beat Toji Zenin in a fight. There was never somebody that they ever met who was as strong as they were. Toji Zenin is somebody who they've never even seen before. Of course, you just trust Gojo that he can finish off this fight against this random guy. Gojo even told Ghetto before he went and fought Toji that Ghetto didn't need to worry. So, Ghetto ran away with the star plasma vessel to go into hiding underneath the Jujutsu Technical College, where they could hide until the mission was over with. But as we all know what happens, Toji beat Gojo badly, and then Toji went and fought Suguru Geto. Now this is where Ghetto's sort of mental breakdown begins to happen, because although he doesn't experience it fully here, this moment is sort of the trigger for what happens to Ghetto later. See, Toji beats up Ghetto badly. Not only does Toji beat up Ghetto badly, he beats him up the entire time Ghetto is thinking that his best friend has just died. Remember how I was saying earlier, these burdens that you deal with and these things and problems that you face every day, you go through all of these things with your best friend. Well, in this moment, you've just found out that he's dead. As far as you don't know that Gojo has just resurrected himself and has a new understanding of curse energy. As far as you know, he's just died. And you can see it right here. As Ghetto is fighting with Toji, his facial expressions seem distressed. He not only knows that it's sort of hard for him to fight this guy because Gojo just lost to him, but he's also fighting while figuring out that his best friend has just died, which is one of the worst things that could happen to a Jujutsu sorcerer. Now, of course, Toji doesn't kill Ghetto because he doesn't know what will happen with the curses that Ghetto has after he dies, so Toji lets Ghetto live. And of course we know that Gojo ends up getting back up and defeating Toji, and everything seems okay for the time being. You know, yeah, the mission failed, but at least Gojo and Ghetto are alive. For a moment there, it seemed like we had lost the strongest duo. But something happened as a result of this fight. Gojo went up an entire level in strength. He now has a new understanding of his limitless technique. And because of this, Gojo and Ghetto are no longer the strongest duo. We see that a year after the Toji incident, Gojo shows Shoko and Ghetto his new abilities. His infinity that he always had would just be running around the clock. You know, Gojo now can use things like red and purple that he wasn't able to use before because he wasn't as good with Limitless before. He didn't have that same understanding of curse energy that he has now. So, Gojo now has his 6 eyes using reverse curse technique around the clock on his body. We see that Gojo is in high spirits. He now can use new abilities that he was not able to use before. And although Gojo seems very happy in this moment, we see that Ghetto has a sorrow look on his face. And Ghetto thinks to himself, at this moment, Satoru Gojo became the strongest. We even see this panel where Gojo can notice that something is wrong with Ghetto. He even asks him if he's lost any weight. And Ghetto just thinks to himself, Gojo can handle missions on his own now. Shoko never went on dangerous missions to begin with, so by default, I've been going on more missions alone as well. And of course, Ghetto just gives Gojo a principled answer. He says, no, I'm just a little tired from this summer heat. But we see Ghetto's real thoughts at the bottom of the page. It says, it was a busy summer. Last year's frequent disasters probably had something to do with it. Curses spawned from everywhere like maggots. An endless cycle of exorcism and consumption. Exercise, consume. It's a taste that nobody knows. The taste of a curse, like ingesting a rag used to wipe up vomit. Exercise, consume. And then we see Ghetto thinking to himself, for he asks himself, for whom is he doing this for? Ever since that day, it's been running through his head. What I saw was nothing out of the ordinary, a hideous evil known to everyone, knowing that full well I chose to protect them as a Jujutsu sorcerer. Don't lose your way. So what's actually happening here? What is Ghetto saying, and why is this so important to his downfall? Well, let's take a look at the first part first, where he says that Gojo is now able to go on missions alone. This is what you call separation problems. Ghetto now doesn't have that buddy that he had before. You could say they're still friends, but it's not the same. The reason that Ghetto and Gojo were so bonded is because they relied on each other for strength. Not just that, but emotional support as well. You see, when they went on these missions, they could rely on each other to pick up the slack that one of them wasn't. And that is because they were around each other in the same level of power. There's a certain burden that comes with being the strongest person. Everything sort of seems like it falls on your shoulders. And at first, they both shared this together. But now, Gojo is on an entirely new level than before. Gojo is now the strongest person there is. So this whole dynamic, this strong bond that was there between Gojo and Ghetto no longer exists. You could say that Ghetto is most likely dealing with separation anxiety, which is why he's even had trouble eating, and that is why Gojo notices that Ghetto has lost weight. This was the beginning of the downfall for Suguru Geto. And then if we look at the second part, we see that Ghetto is thinking about what it tastes like to exercise and consume curses. You see, Ghetto has to go through this horrible act of actually eating the curses that he uses, because we know that he can just use a bunch of curses, but the way he does this is by actually eating them. He says that the curses taste like a rag of throw up. But Ghetto goes through this on his own. There isn't somebody you can share this taste with. Not like you would want to share it anyway, but Ghetto has to go through this horrible taste of throw up on his own. And although he's had to do this his entire time as a Jujutsu sorcerer, it seems like the taste is even worse now. Now we see at the end of his shower that he calls normal humans monkeys, and we see that he tends to call humans monkeys more in Volume 0, but for the time being, this is the first and only time that he has called and referred to humans as monkeys. But what happens next is arguably the thing that truly sends Ghetto into the deep spiral that we see him go down in the series, and that is the conversation that he has with Yuki Tsukumo. You see, as Ghetto and Yuki are talking, Yuki says that she wants to get to the root cause of curses, and Ghetto asks the root cause. See, Yuki says that she doesn't want to exercise curses after they appear, she actually wants a world where curses don't even exist. And we see this panel where Ghetto looks super excited. It looks like this is exactly what Ghetto wants as well. And you know, Yuki gives this whole lesson about where curses come from. They basically come from humans in fear, and Yuki says that there is 2 ways to get rid of these curses. One is to eradicate curse energy from all of humanity, and 2 is to teach humans how to control their curse energy. And you know, Yuki even says that the first idea is not a bad one and that there is a model case for it. Ghetto asks who is she talking about, and Yuki says Toji Zenin. She says that Toji Zenin is the only person to have completely rid himself of curse energy. And remember how Yuki said that curses basically spawn from humans and the fear that humans have? Well, Yuki gives this bright idea to Ghetto. She says that Jujutsu sorcerers don't give birth to curses, and this is because the curse energy amount released from sorcerers compared to non-sorcerers is extremely low. There's a difference in how much the sorcerers consume and use curse energy because of their profession, and this is why all of the Jujutsu sorcerers don't have this huge flow of curse energy from their bodies like normal people do, because normal people don't know how to control their curse energy, they just have it and it sort of lingers. Now here is where the most crucial part of Ghetto and Yuki's conversation happens. Yuki says, if we're talking in general terms, if every single human became a Jujutsu sorcerer, no curse would ever be born again. And Ghetto responds with, then why not just kill every non-Jujutsu sorcerer? And Yuki sort of gives this look to Ghetto before saying that that actually is an option, and in fact it might be the easiest route. That you can sort of evolve people by weeding out the weak non-Jujutsu sorcerers. But even Yuki says that she isn't that crazy to even execute a plan like that, and she asks Ghetto if he hates non-Jujutsu sorcerers, and Ghetto says, I don't know. I used to think that Jujutsu sorcerers existed to protect non-sorcerers, but recently I've been doubting whether non-sorcerers are worth fighting for. The preciousness of the weak, the ugliness of the weak. I can no longer tell the difference. The part of me that looks down on non-sorcerers, the part of me that tries to resist that feeling. If being a Jujutsu sorcerer is like running a marathon, then the finish line is too unclear. I don't know how I really feel. So we're already seeing here, just a year after the Toji incident, how swapped his morals are becoming. He even says here that he used to think that Jujutsu sorcerers existed to protect humans, but at this point in time, it's becoming unclear. He doesn't know what he actually wants. Yes, he wants people to be safe, but at the same time, he's just beginning to see humans as weak and ugly, and this is the problem that Ghetto is beginning to have. He sort of lost that close bond that he had with his strongest friend, and now he's sort of alone in this world of curses and doesn't know a solution. But throughout this conversation with Yuki, he is beginning to find one, and the solution he found was to kill every human, and to make everybody turn into Jujutsu sorcerers so there will never again be a world of curses. Which is sort of weird, right? Given that Jujutsu sorcerers are basically the strength of their curse technique. They make this idea in Jujutsu Kaisen that sorcerers are as valuable as their curse technique is. And for Ghetto, think about it. His curse technique is eating and consuming curses and even using these curses in battle. But he wants to live in a world where there are no curses. It's like he's going against what he actually is. And this is sort of a cool dynamic that I find in Ghetto, that even though he is reliant on curses for his curse technique and his strength, he wants to live in a world where there are no curses. Now we see that Yuki drives away on a motorcycle, and that was the end of the conversation that I believe completely started the spiral of Suguru Geto. Yes, the Toji incident was, you could say, the trigger her, it was the initial sort of fuse to the firework, but this conversation with Yuki where she brings up this possibility of just killing humans is what I think really sends Ghetto into overdrive mode because of what we see Ghetto do afterwards. We see that Ghetto is dispatched to a village because there's a curse that needs to be exorcised. But we see that Ghetto comes across these two little girls. And these two little girls actually end up being the camera girls that he uses to fight as a part of his group in Volume 0. But at this point in time, they're just two hopeless girls that don't even know what's going on. And Ghetto releases them from their cage, and we see that instead of actually helping this village, Ghetto killed everybody and the presidents in the village, and he fled from the Jujutsu Society. Now we see that Gojo and Shoko are informed of what's happened. And we see that Shoko actually goes to talk to Ghetto. And then, Ghetto says, well, I'm going to create a world of only Jujutsu sorcerers. And Ghetto says that he doesn't need anybody to understand what he's doing. And we see that Shoko calls Gojo to come handle Ghetto because, well, who's better to call than his old duo? Now here comes some very important dialogue, and this is when Gojo comes across Ghetto. He tells Ghetto to explain himself, and Ghetto says there's no need to explain, you already heard everything from Shoko. And Gojo even brings up how Ghetto killed his own parents, and Ghetto even says, well, it wouldn't be fair if I didn't kill my own parents. He's being fair and, well, you could say equally unfair to everybody. And Ghetto says that what he's doing is called justice. And here comes a very important part, so if you've only been listening slightly, I suggest you really listen up here. Gojo tells Ghetto that he's attempting the impossible, and Ghetto says that Gojo is arrogant. Gojo doesn't know what he's talking about. He says, what? And Ghetto says, you could do it, Satoru. You're trying to convince me that it's impossible when you yourself could do it. Are you the strongest because you're Satoru Gojo, or are you Satoru Gojo because you're the strongest? Gojo says, what are you getting at? Ghetto says, if I could be you, wouldn't my impossible ideal become possible? Ghetto says, this is the life I've chosen. All I can do now is give it all I've got. If you want to kill me, kill me. There's meaning in that too. And this was the last time we saw Gojo and Ghetto together until Volume 0. Now, trust me, I won't go over every single thing that happens in Volume 0 because, well, the downfall of Ghetto has already mostly taken effect, and Volume 0 is sort of just the conclusion. Volume 0 is the ending to everything that Ghetto had been setting up for all of these years since he was in high school. But as a short summary, we see that in Volume 0, he plans to go to war against the Jujutsu world. We see that he has this group of people that he refers to as his family, and one of the most prominent people in this family is Miguel. We actually get to see fight Gojo in a really cool fight in the movie. But we see that Ghetto knows that he's getting himself into a war that he can't win. He even says that his chances of winning this war is only about 30%. But he needs one thing that can help him win this war, and that is Rika. Rika is, well, the person that is attached to Yuta Okotsu. She is a curse of just endless curse energy that Ghetto feels if he can get for himself, he can win this war. You see, one of the most important and sort of subtle parts in Volume 0 that sort of shows how much Ghetto has changed and how strong he believes in his ideals is when Maki and Panda go back to the high school to help protect Yuta. Seeing this has actually made Ghetto overwhelmingly happy. He says that seeing Jujutsu sorcerers protect each other is what he strives for. Now, as we know, Yuta ends up winning the fight against Ghetto, and Ghetto sort of seems like he got away. Yes, he took big damage and his arm is completely off, but Ghetto has seemingly made it away alive, and he is walking alone down an alleyway until he sees Satoru Gojo come up in front of him. Now, this is one of the saddest dialogues I have seen in Jujutsu Kaisen. Ghetto says to Gojo, it looks like you finally made it, and it looks like you'll be the one to take me down. Gojo says that all of Ghetto's family has gotten away, and Ghetto even says, well, you sent those two here knowing I'd defeat them, just so you could trigger Okotsu's growth. He's talking about how Gojo sent Maki and Panda after Yuta, knowing that, well, Maki and Panda would lose. And Gojo says, well, it's called trust. People with beliefs like yours won't kill a young sorcerer without reason. And Ghetto says, trust, huh? I didn't realize you still felt any connection with me. And he gives Gojo Yuta's student ID back. Gojo asks Ghetto if he has any last words, and Ghetto says, no matter what, I'll always hate those monkeys. But it's not like I hate everyone at Jujutsu High. It's just that in this world, I couldn't truly be happy from the bottom of my heart. And right here, we see that Gojo says something to Ghetto. And although we don't see what it says here in the manga, we see and learn later what Gojo actually said to Ghetto here. And what he said was, you are my best friend, my one and only. And Ghetto sort of smiles and has this sort of sad but happy moment at the end of his life where he says to Gojo, you should at least curse me at the end. And that is the last time that we ever saw from Suguru Geto. His downfall was sad and tragic. Yes, you might understand what he did. I personally don't agree with what Suguru Geto did throughout his lifetime, but no matter what, you can say that he was a troubled kid who decided to take the wrong route to solve the problems that he had in front of him. It seemed like he had all of the things figured out back when he and Gojo were a strong bond, when they had this strong duo going on where they could rely on each other with the tragic things that they had to deal with their entire high school lives. Being the two strongest people around truly does take a mental toll on somebody, especially remembering that they are just in high school. They're the strongest people who have to deal with saving and even losing some human lives day by day. And although Ghetto was okay at first, once he lost that strong bond that he had with Gojo, he began to just spiral out of control. You see, I personally think that Ghetto's ending is the saddest in Jujutsu Kaisen, because even though you want to hate somebody who makes the same decisions that Ghetto does, you sort of understand them. You understand the reason that Ghetto does these things, but at the end of the day, you disagree with him. You wish that in some world Ghetto could just be good again, that everything could go back to normal, he could return to the Jujutsu Society, but I think that along the way, Ghetto realized it's too late. Once he committed that heinous act of killing those people back at Jujutsu High, he basically sealed his fate. So I'll say this, out of all of the beginning and endings of the ups and downs of these characters in Jujutsu Kaisen, Suguru Geto's is the one filled with the most hate and love. With that being said, I want to thank you so much for reaching the end of the video. If you enjoyed, then please leave a like and subscribe to the channel, as I would really appreciate if you could stick around for some more videos as I make vids on different topics that you guys give me and a few that I come up with on my own. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.